Metro branch, but we have our speaker meetings open to anyone.
Yep.
That's
Yeah,
good.
that's what there might be a few people further afield.
Well, that's always our hope, but I only started our Facebook page an hour ago. So it's only been advertised here and by the New South Wales Association.
Yep.
They put it on in their honeybee news and on Facebook as well.
Yep. So you guys are well and I don't know whether would you say well and truly through the invasion phase for varroa mite now in Sydney? Have you sort of seen varroa numbers steady down, or do you still have people in the area who are still getting mites come through?
I will let other people answer that one, but I think there's still sometimes like big fluxes.
Yep.
What does everyone else find?
I
Uh,
seem to have bees that are susceptible to breeding varroa.
Mm-hmm.
I recently had 3 hives with high varroa counts, and they all decided to abscond together, and they're all genetically related.
Mm. Yes, absconding has certainly been the order of the day. Everyone's seen a lot of that, I think, or a lot of people have. Have you guys seen a lot of superseding in hives throughout Sydney?
seen
Not this
a
year.
bit, but not a huge amount. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether it's this particular area. Like I'm just around Ballina there, but yeah, we've definitely seen a lot of superseding in this area,
Yeah,
and
right.
then some absconding as well. And then yeah, other people have had hives that they haven't sort of treated timely enough, or for whatever reason they have actually just died of varroa mite. So it's been very the variation has been the main factor.
Yeah, right.
Yes, we're all still learning.
Mm.
Um,
Whatever.
well, thanks very much everyone for coming. It's good to see a decent turnout. We always like more people though. And thanks very much, Jackie, for agreeing to talk. We might go straight into the talk, and then later on, the members will have our a short meeting afterwards.
Cool. Well, I'll share my screen if that's all good. Hopefully my internet keeps up all good here with all the kids on school holidays watching Netflix. Right, so can you guys see my first screen there all good, and you can't see any extra stuff clogging the screen?
All good.
All good.
All
It
good.
looks like a slide presentation. Yep.
Cool, that's very promising. Right, so my husband and I have Ballina Honey and Honeybale Farm up near Lismore Ballina area, so Northern Rivers, very subtropical. We've got a pretty diverse farm. We've got pecans, pigs, bees. We only run about 70 hives ourselves, but we
Oh,
pack about 12 to 15 to 20 tons of honey a year. So we do rely on our local commercial beekeepers as well. And in 2022, I applied to Nuffield to study varroa mite because I thought that was a big risk from Northern Australia. And then just after my first interview, varroa mite got declared at Newcastle, and Cooper Shooten at Southern Cross Uni said, Jackie, you need to go and study varroa mite. So here I am. I thought, oh, varroa mite, world's worst pest of European honeybees. That'll be studied to bits. Everyone will know everything there is to know about it. And I was really surprised to find that for subtropical areas and for beekeepers like us that sell food grade beeswax, there's very little known about varroa mite. There's very little reliable information out there. So that was my mission, was to find how we were going to stay in business selling food grade beeswax and honey to an area that values chemical free produce in a way that was going to be compatible with varroa mite. So part one of this, I'll let you know where we went and our general view of what we found. And part two, I'll go over what we've done with our integrated pest management. Can I just get a quick check? So is there anyone here who's like a beginner beekeeper, like not confident with their alcohol wash, drone uncapping, doesn't really, struggling to make plans for varroa mite yet? Or are we all fairly experienced?
I've never done alcohol wash,
Yep.
but I've done many sugar shakes,
Yep.
and I don't know. I don't want to kill them.
Definitely a problem.
Yeah.
Do we have any commercial beekeepers here, or are we all sort of smaller scale, hobby scale? Luke's on mute, but I think he's saying yes there. And Nadine, so I know you're basically a scientist who's relying on your scientific knowledge with the bees. Do we have many people here who mentor others with their beekeeping?
Bruce,
Yeah, I do.
Paul.
Yep, so that must have been a hell of a ride through varroa mite, trying to learn yourself while you're teaching others. So there's a lot of stuff in here that's probably fairly beginner stuff for varroa mite. So I'll cruise through it fairly quickly, but it could be helpful too for people who are mentoring others, just a way of looking at things or a sort of matching up with what happens elsewhere. So we started our travels in the USA. Hawaii is the one place that we went to that was really similar climate-wise to the Northern Rivers, really subtropical. The majority of your varroa mite information, you guys might know already, comes out of Europe and North America. Big brood breaks, totally different climate. Hawaii was the one place where you can get honey all year round, you can have brood all year round, you can have drones all year round, and really similar beekeeping demographics where you've got these big commercial exporters who have to stay below a certain number of varroa mite in an alcohol wash to be able to export their queens. So they're chucking in every chemical they can find. And then you've got guys like Dennis Tanaka here, who runs 200 hives fully treatment free. It took him 15 years to get there, but he's pretty happy with his operation. And then operations like this one here on the Big Island, where despite the heat, he's using just formic acid is really the only chemical that he treats with. And there's also a wide variety of educational people who are treatment free, but don't seem to really equate that to doing anything with their hives and just think, oh, well, we just let it run. And there were some of the sickest, most poorly looking hives I'd ever seen in my life in those. So really wide range of beekeepers. We also went to Florida, Georgia, and California. So we went and saw Bob Binney. We saw a number of researchers there. We went and saw Randy Oliver in California. This is the back of Randy Oliver's vehicle with his alcohol wash setup. My favourite thing about Randy Oliver was that he's really got that engineer's creed where you fail fast and fail often. So you try lots of different things on a bigger scale as you can afford to do it. And you very quickly discount what doesn't work and discover new methods. I thought that was a great way of going about things. And it'll be interesting to see whether we head the same way as the United States with the big pollination circuit or not in the future. So New Zealand, North Island, they're very influential in the Pacific, the home of the carboid strip, oxalic acid, and the home of own use chemical permits, which is for some of them is a disaster and for some of them is a real win, depending on how it goes and how well they run trials. I've found very little interest there or in the United States in varroa resistance. So although it's there, there's plenty of operations that are varroa resistant. It's not really widespread and there's not a big commercial push for it. Some people control their mites well and some not. It was very interesting that a lot of people there have said that over the years, they used to only treat 2 or 3 times with their carboid strips, and now they've just got them in permanently all year. So even though they've got a big difference to the USA, like, last year, USA, 65% hive deaths, like that's just horrific. New Zealand's only sort of 10 to 15%. Are they heading the same direction over time? Who knows? We went to the Pacific Beekeeping Congress in Fiji. These people are all on our doorstep. They have tropicalax mite, so very interesting to see how they approach their biosecurity and things. Masters of the value add, but the big thing is a lot of them don't have the basics right. And a lot of them have very poor genetics in their bees or low resource access. Like people in Fiji got told varroa jacobsoni would not be an issue for them, and quickly found that was quite incorrect. New Zealand pushing the Pacific towards a chemical approach is not necessarily going to be a good thing right across for Australia too, whereas if they had a better push for good genetics, we have exported some Australian genetics into Fiji, which is, you know, not really varroa resistant yet. We went to the UK, including the Isle of Man. That was a really interesting one. Right out in the middle, big port, lots of people coming and going from surrounding areas, and still varroa free 20 years down the track. So anyone that's in a very isolated area, you can potentially stay varroa free for a long time. Increasing varroa resistance, they've got wider and wider population right across Wales in particular of varroa resistant operations, plenty of sort of small commercial to hobby size operations that are varroa free. And I'll talk a little bit later about Westerham beekeepers, their club level project, which I reckon is a great model for Australian clubs. And varroa management, it was sorry, what was that? Oh, no, we're good. Yeah, it was really good to see varroa management was just a part of life for them quite often without having to even treat. So lots of baseboard numbers. Can I just get a quick look? Is there anyone here who's using baseboard counts for their varroa mite, like to monitor mites in their hives? Or are we all doing sort of alcohol sugar shake? This is a good one. So this is it's really interesting. So these bees are VSH behaviour. They're pulling out drone Sunday, which was pretty cool to see. Next one. So Germany and Sweden. Germany has the Varroa Resistance 2033 project. So they are trying to have a big push right across Europe. It's really only prominent in Germany, but they're trying to spread it as far as possible. There's mostly people treating with organic acids, and they're trying to transition as many people as possible to mechanical methods instead. And people using mechanical methods, they're having a really big push to get varroa resistant genetics in there. So by 2033, they're hoping to have the bulk of Germany treatment free for varroa mite. They do a lot of single drone artificial insemination, which at first I thought, why would they do that? That's a silly idea. But it's just so that they can absolutely guarantee that those eggs are the varroa resistant genetics that they want, and then they'll do a properly mated queen from that. But of course they have a big winter brood break, which is helpful for them. Very cool seeing hives in sort of as natural conditions as you get, even if you don't have hollows in logs. So shipper hives and whatnot, and skep hives, very cool. And one of the important things we're going over with them was sort of what our conditions were like for the year for temperature and rainfall and brood levels and nectar levels, and trying to match that up with how they do their mechanical varroa control methods, which I will go over later on. So before we get into the integrated pest management bit, this is one of my favourite diagrams for just integrating bee life cycles and varroa life cycles. And I think before you launch into integrated pest management, you really need to have a look at what you actually need out of your management. So down there, you guys would have brood all year round, but probably not drones all year round. Would that be fairly right for Sydney? Anyone want to throw in an answer on that one?
Yeah, we can have drones year round, but it just depends on conditions. I mean, temperature-wise, they're certainly, like I've often had drones year round, but then, you know, in poor seasons, then they will keep them out. So, yeah.
Sure, yeah. So that's obviously going to be drastically different from most of what you see in Europe and the USA, but
Yeah.
really similar to what you see in Hawaii. And I think a lot of people go over integrated pest management without really taking into account how different conditions are elsewhere. And also, are most of you guys stationary hives, or do we have any like really mobile commercial beekeepers listening?
Stationary.
Yeah, I think we're all
Yeah,
stationary.
that's the same with us. Yeah, we're pretty stationary too. So obviously, if you're moving them, that's a very different story. But that was one thing that was quite impressive with Randy Oliver's efforts to breed varroa-resistant bees, was that he is sort of fully facing the open pollination circuit with almonds and whatnot, and the queens were still doing quite well. So, but yeah, definitely does help to be stationary, I think, in that sort of thing. So other pest interactions. Would I be right in saying you guys would have had a pretty bad year for small hive beetle?
Yeah, you would. It was terrible.
Yeah, especially as all the feral hives die. All the small hive beetle has been coming out of the feral population and hammering the managed populations.
Coming out of the woodwork, yeah. And I mean, it's been such a good thing for us that our bees have been used to small hive beetle for 20 years. And, bees that were susceptible just to small hive beetle would have been long gone decades ago. Hawaii actually copped varroa mites and small hive beetle within a year of each other. And it was just a wipeout. They were shovel loads of small hive beetle larvae off the floor of their honey rooms, and they were having exploding IBCs and things like that, just because they didn't know any better about small hive beetle, but 20 years ago. So yeah, we're at least lucky that our bees have learnt to manage that. Apis cerana will be an interesting one. So I don't think you'll get it around Sydney. I don't think it'll survive that far south, but who knows? It's certainly been spotted, been trapped out a few times around Brisbane. So varroa destructor in some areas have jumped back onto Apis cerana, the Asian honeybee, and in other areas they've just been too far removed. And varroa jacobsoni is the original parasite on Asian honeybee, and varroa destructor hasn't jumped back in some areas. So do we have anyone who's seen Tropolaelax mite in the flesh anywhere? If you've seen bees in Asia or anything like that, I reckon that'll be the next big thing. And that was one of our really big things for pushing for mechanical methods of varroa control and using the brood, because eventually we're going to see Tropolaelax mite in Australia, and anyone that's relying on synthetic chemicals that rely on phoretic mites, they're just not going to be that effective against Tropolaelax mite. Or your brood control is the sort of the way of the future for that sort of thing. Have you guys seen much in the way of virus effects down there yet? You've had mites for a little bit longer than us, but I haven't heard any reports of like serious virus damage from down your way yet. Anyone want to comment on that one?
I've heard that people are seeing more sac brood.
Interesting. So obviously I won't go into it too much here. I mean, it's a whole study in itself, but obviously we haven't found deformed wing virus anywhere yet, but we've got plenty of other viruses that we may find start replicating in varroa and start having issues. So a lot of people were really surprised to see high mite numbers without killing hives at first, but it's exactly what Hawaii saw, big high mite numbers, and then over say 5 years, viruses built up, number of survivable mites takes a nosedive. So it'd be interesting to see what goes on. So we developed an integrated pest management brood comb. Anyone that's mentoring other people, feel free to use it. We didn't find a lot of integrated pest management very useful for beekeepers, so this is what we made. Where number one, around the world, even beekeepers that weren't using varroa-resistant queens said, we see this is the way of the future. Varroa-resistant queens is the way to head. And then getting the hive husbandry right, knowing how many mites are there, getting that right, breaking the reproductive cycle, and removing phoretic mites. So I'll go over how we did it. And we're already doing this for small hive beetle. We found a lot of people were quite intimidated by, trying to go through an integrated pest management. They just wanted to chuck chemicals in, but we're already doing it for small hive beetle. We already find queens that are adapted to it. You don't use queens that are no good for small hive beetle. You put your hive in the sun. You only add morning sun. You only add a box when it needs it. You never have the hive bigger than it can defend. No tight crevices, frames up against the sidewall. You know how many small hive beetle your hives can handle at that time of year in those environmental conditions, and with the weather coming that you've got. You remove slime outs. You reduce struggling hives. Most people at least would mow the grass short around their hives so the ground dries out quicker and small hive beetle doesn't pupate as much. And you get in, as a last ditch thing, you get in there and you squash them or you put traps in. So we're already doing that integrated pest management brood comb for small hive beetle. So I'm not sure how knowledgeable you guys are already. I'll get through a lot of this fairly quickly. I'm going to say most of you guys are sort of fairly knowledgeable on actual varroa resistant traits. So, actually, before I do, this is a big one. We get people ringing up all the time, like even now, wanting to buy hives, right? And I always speak to them. I always tell them straight up, this is a terrible time to get into beekeeping. And I always speak to them about what are your actual goals and what are you looking for? And if their goal isn't directly related to European honeybees, if they just want to pollinate their veggie patch and enjoy seeing bees come and go, I talk them into this little guy here, like tetragonula or native honeybees. I think it's a much, why deal, first rule of integrated pest management, why deal with the pest at all if you've got a perfectly good option that doesn't apply to. So native honeybees as a first choice for people that don't need European honeybees. So imagine you guys are probably fairly savvy on like your brood might be your brood might be suppressing your mites, your worker bees could be suppressing your mites, and your bees aren't going to undertake a lot of that behaviour or a lot of your grooming or biting or anything like that, which is pretty controversial, unless they've got enough stores so they have the time to do it. And about integrating these into mite non-reproduction. So natural selection. Do we have anyone here who's actually like fully treatment free, as in just let the bees go and see how they fare? Has anyone actually done that, or is everyone actually managing mites?
I did that initially and I lost a lot.
Yep. So that's really the we have a lot of people up here trying the same thing and getting the same sort of result. And I always like to look across the known varroa resistant populations across the world and think, why on earth are there so few? And it's not just because there's been very little concerted push. I think the other big reason too is that because there hasn't been a big concerted push or a lot of connection on varroa resistance, anywhere where they are just where varroa mite is just let run, the bees just getting overwhelmed. Whereas I really like the varroa resistance 2033 approach, where you're supporting your best hives to get there, rather than expecting them to be there from the start. So Steve Riley at Westerham Beekeepers, I reckon he is a really good model. I speak about a few other ones in my Nuffield report, but I reckon he is a great model for how to get a club level varroa resistance group happening. They're in a densely populated area, lots of backyard beekeepers, not that far from London, and they just continuously select for quality queens and continuously deselect poor performers. They're using baseboard counts, so 5 per day annual average breeder queen, 6 to 10, yeah, she's okay. If she has over 10 mites per day on an annual average drop, they requeen. So we're not doing this yet because in the invasion phase, I think there's just too much going on and everyone's doing something different and everyone's got their own ideas. But this is certainly what I'll be heading out, trying to get our local club to head towards once things have settled down a little bit. over the next couple of years. They stopped chemical treating. They used, because they wanted to be able to really tell, is that queen doing a decent job? So they used a single frame trap out method, which I'll go over later on, to control mites until they had enough. They've got about 175 queens that they considered to be treatment free, so not treated for, say, 5 years in that queen line, and they swap them around between each other to make sure she is doing a good job. And he's got a very good description of it in his book. And they're looking for recapped cells, chewed out pupae, uncapped, not recapped yet. And on their baseboards, they're really looking for not just mite drop, but bits of pupae. So that VSH behaviour, where they're looking for this hive, these worker bees are dragging out bits of pupae. So I won't spend too much time on the hive husbandry side, because I'm sort of rushing through towards our actual trials. But I think one of the big things that I found the difference between well-run hives in places like Europe and places like Fiji, where they're really struggling, was not even just the varroa management, but just their basic getting that basic husbandry right. Have you got good forage so they're protected as well as possible against viruses? If you don't have a brood rake, making one, keeping your hives out of really bad small hive beetle areas, reducing swarming off and things like that. So if you can, be as far away from anyone else as possible, and good biosecurity. The USA had, every apiary we went to had these big graveyards of dead out hives, and lots of robbing, lots of open feeding. And I think Australia does a great job with biosecurity by not doing any of that and keeping things clean and tidy. And I reckon that will stand us in good stead for varroa mite. Things like pseudoscorpions, they don't eat a lot of mites. They might eat a few, but if you're using organic acids or synthetic miticides, you're not going to get any of that ecology in your hive. I won't go through too many of these at the moment. Is everyone using drones? Is everyone forking out drones as a method of reducing varroa mite, or or are people not worried about that so much?
I'm not doing it yet, but I'm very interested in it.
Yep. Yeah,
what I found with drone removal is I'm finding the initial the bees are not drawing out enough drone comb. Raise a reasonable amount of drones and then just stop.
Yep.
So it's not really effective because of this variation.
Yeah, very seasonal. Yeah, but in a good season when they are doing it, though, I reckon, like, Westerham beekeepers haven't done it at all because they're breeding resistant bees. They're confident. They want to keep every good drone that they can. Those drones are precious to them. But for us at the start, we've just forked out every drone we can find, and we found that it helps when the season is good enough for them to draw them out. Small cell size was very, like, some of the guys at Westerham beekeepers thought it was great. Did you know you can buy small cell size foundation for the bees to draw? So it'd be interesting to trial that more. There's been very mixed results on it.
I thought there was a paper that refuted cell size as being impactful, like small cells.
Definitely. And this is so we spoke to Stephen Martin, is one of the world leaders on varroa resistance and what works and what doesn't. And it was really interesting going through all his, he's written so many papers, and going through them with him, and he's saying, no, that's been refuted now. No, that's been refuted. That's been refuted, but then it was brought back in. The biggest thing that we have found with varroa mite is, from traveling and speaking to so many people, is that everything that's found is so context specific, and it doesn't mean that that thing won't work in a different context, and it doesn't mean that that thing that worked will work in any other context. So anything that we've found that was a bit controversial, like small cell size, grooming, we found that there was still a fair following for these things in other situations. Or a big one was sugar dusting. Does anyone use, so not sugar shaking for mite count, but actual sugar dusting of their bees? Does anyone do that?
I know of somebody who did it and swore by it, but they ended up losing their bees
Yep.
in the end. Yeah.
That one has been well refuted. And yet, in the UK, more people sugar dust their bees than use synthetic chemicals. And Randy Oliver did some good trials where he found certain conditions where sugar dusting works great. University of Florida did other trials where they said, no, this does not work at all. So, yeah, any of these things, there's specific places where it works, specific places where it doesn't work. And the biggest thing we found with varroa mite was never go off one scientific study to either prove or disprove anything. It was very eye-opening speaking to a range of such a range of experts who usually disagree.
Yeah, I do sugar shake, and last year I just got 3 sugar shakers and sugar shook the whole brood box.
Yeah, right. Interesting.
If you use the DPI big one, you can put over 1,000 bees in there.
God.
You don't do all the bees in the brood box, but I've got 200 varroa out in 3 shakes.
Did you ever do an alcohol wash to compare?
No, I wasn't doing them in parallel, but because the numbers were changing too quickly.
Yeah, it might be a better job for after the invasion phase, but we found people in New Zealand who were using sugar shakes, and they were just sometimes doing an alcohol wash as well to check how they were going. And then there was other people in Florida, their bee inspector said, no, he just doesn't recommend sugar shakes for beginners because they were just getting too many varied results. And yeah, it was another one of those things with a lot of variation. Has anyone tried doing a propolis envelope, like roughing up the inside walls of their hive to see if the bees will propolis it out really well?
What I've found is that works well if there's good propolis in the area. My bees at Bathurst, propolis starved. If you look at the propolis, it's really poor quality.
Yep. Yeah, definitely an area-specific one. But for areas where it is good, we haven't tried that yet in our area. Just, another thing you've got to set up in your hive that we haven't tried yet. But, yeah, it would be an interesting one to trial in different areas. Just a note too, particularly with viruses incoming at a higher level, we use cotton liners these are lightweight chemical gloves, and I reckon they're great. We bought out another beekeeper with a big AFB issue that we cleaned up. And just if we came across AFB in the hive, we just pulled these off and threw them away. But if we didn't come across it, and now that we've got it cleaned up, we don't come across it as often, these can be disinfected and used over and over. So we went entirely away from leather gloves, just as a point of interest. So mite monitoring methods. So we saw people around. The only one of these that I haven't seen much in use was carbon dioxide. Does anybody here do carbon dioxide? I think it's just inconvenient. People don't seem to do it much. But yeah, we've had all sorts of people swear by whatever they're doing for their uncapping. And I just wanted to point out that right across the world, there's successful people using any of these. None of them are really, truly accurate. I think it would be really good in future to see more research into monitoring methods. But yeah, wherever you go, there's stuff that works no matter what you're doing. And I think the more important thing is just knowing what you're looking at. So I'd love to make a graph like this for the Northern Rivers, and one for the Sydney area, and one for out west, and these for different areas where you really get a map of how many drones you get for the year, how your adult bee population changes for the year, how your brood load changes for the year, because some people are going to be using this neighbour over here uses baseboards, and this neighbour over here uses sugar shakes, and this neighbour over here is uncapping drones. It'll just be really good to be able to actually compare if you all want to manage mites together, which is, of course, a really good idea. Interesting thing with drone uncapping. Is anyone using drone uncapping to actually count how many mites they've got? Actually, to decide if they need to treat or not? I can't remember what her name is in the UK, but her studies say that you need to uncap 300 of them to make any reasonable decisions off. So there's a lot of people around the world that will just uncap a few drones and go, oh yeah, I think I'll chuck some formic acid in. And, you know, you might be treating when you really don't need to. So is anyone, how are you guys finding the New South Wales DPI treatment thresholds? Is anyone actually using them religiously? Nobody? Is everybody just sort of making their own? I mean, that's exactly what we're doing. Like, you know, this is really just an idea anyway. You know, the New South Wales DPI doesn't know exactly what is going to be the treatment threshold in 5 years' time. Might be totally different when we've all got a bit of a better handle of how mites are going to work in our conditions under our treatment regime. But all the experts we spoke to said to go early in the season. The guys that were doing a good job with their bees all said, do not wait until numbers are high. In fact, they're all horrified by even waiting until 9 mites. But the Stephen Martin studies all say that actual treatment-free populations of bees will run fairly high numbers of mites. They'll all be like 10 to 15% in an alcohol wash. And you just have to make your own judgment about what that's going to be, uncapping or baseboard or whatever you're doing. But yeah, everyone said if you know your bee's going to need managing because the bees are only new at it, we're only new at it. You know, we're not going to be varroa resistant yet. Go early in the season. If you leave it till here, your bee population's dropping off, your mite population's rising. I only had 6 mites per 100 bees here. Oh God, now I've got 35 mites per 100 bees, and suddenly it's a lot harder to treat here. So they all said go early. Randy Oliver splits, I think he splits all of his like 4 waves at the start of spring. You know, great way to get mites under control early. So breaking the reproductive cycle. This is my favorite bit, and this is the bit that I'm hoping to talk some people into having a go at down your way. I think there's at least one person that's trying it down there. They got absolutely swamped by small hive beetle, and I think they've given up on it. I can't get back in touch with them now. But this is what we're doing. This is the only thing that we have done to control mites in our hives. So we're monitoring using alcohol washers. We have actually tried to use the 9 mites per wash as a threshold, and of course it goes, you know, way over that. Some of them are hitting 35 mites and things like that because it's the invasion phase. They're all over the place. But we've got a cage like this. We put it down in the middle. We put in a sticky or a crappy old brood frame, anything that hasn't got too much brood in it. We slide that in. We tried a foundation frame, but the conditions this season were just appalling. The winter rainfall and autumn rainfall was just appalling. So we ended up in winter particularly just putting 2 stickies in. But this method, you're supposed to use a foundation frame and the bees are supposed to carefully build it out. Or you could just use an open one for drones. But long story short, you put in one that they're going to lay out quick, one that they're going to lay out slow. You put your queen in, you cap it all off. You come back in 2 weeks, or day 12. We left a little bit longer because we had a lot of drone brood. This one's going to be all capped off, so you're going to pull it out and get rid of it. This one's not going to be capped off yet. You're going to put another sticky in beside it instead. Put the queen back in, cap it off. And then by day 24, you're going to pull both of them out. They're both going to be all capped off. The rest, because your queen is in the cage, the rest of the hive has become broodless, and it's all based on the amount of time you take and the amount of area you've provided there, all those you can catch up to 95% of your phoretic mites using this method, because they're all going to migrate into the middle there. And then you're going to get rid of them, release your queen, chuck a couple of stickies or foundation, depending on the season and what you've got available in there, and away you go. Does that sort of make sense? Or does anyone have any questions or want me to sort of explain how that works better? We're all pretty happy?
So can I just clarify?
Yep.
So essentially, the frames in the isolation cage with the queen is a lure to encourage mites into that area, and that happens over a 24-day period. And each time you've got capped brood, you throw that frame away. So
Yep.
so you wait until it's capped, and if you what say it rains on day 12, right? And it rains for a week. What's the consequence of removing those frames on day 17, say?
So, of course, this happened to us rather a lot over this autumn and winter, not being able to get anywhere near the hives when we wanted to. So I'm actually going to show you another method next that was used originally, where you really do have to be there on the right day. The advantage of this method, so we had our trainee beekeeper mostly doing this, because we had a lot of other things going on and whatnot. So yeah, we were very rarely there on the right day. And the worst that's going to happen is that you're going to get very mite-filled bees hatch out and reinfest your hive and put you back at square one, or behind square one, really, because you might get a lot of mites, foundress mites breeding in that. So it's the exact same problem as if you use drone brood to trap out and you don't get there at the right time, and your drone brood hatches out and you've just made a little miniature mite bomb, basically. But it does take a long time for it to get that bad. So when you put this frame in, you've got a fair bit of leeway there before that capped brood is actually hatching out. So there is a bit of room for error. There is a bit of room for rain. This method's used for people with up to about 250 hives. We're not going to use it in the long term. We're actually going to use, because it's quite slow finding the queen sometimes. I mean, we all know you might find her on frame one, or you might go through the box twice. We're actually going to start using slide-in queen excluders. So 2 excluders, we run 9 frames in most of our boxes. So you can just walk up, slide them in, walk away, and come back. And the only one with eggs and larvae is going to be the one that she's in. But yeah, it's obviously a problem if you can't get there for weeks. But yeah, hopefully you get at least like half a day where you can get out there and be able to swap it out. But that's where this is not really very good for big commercials, but it's good for small commercial and right down to hobby beekeepers. And it's very reliably effective when it's right. Whereas, something like formic acid, which I'll go over shortly, that's like 30 to 70, a little bit further on, sorry. That's like 30 to 70% range. Like, people don't realize how much range you get in your chemical effectiveness, whereas this is, as long as you follow the method, pretty reliable.
So with your from your observations, maybe I don't know, did you get a sense that if you do mistime it, because your queen is still laying, the mites still stay in that area, even if your timing is a little bit off?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they're looking for brood to lay in, and that is the only brood for them to lay in. The only thing that really stymied our efforts in that respect was the hives. I'll show you the data later, but we had a lot of superseding and a lot of absconding. And I think that was just the nature of the invasion phase, and also the nature of the queens we bought. So we bought queens out of the varroa resistant breeding program. I'm really glad we did. I think they've performed far better than a lot of local queens. But because it's a very program in its infancy and you're introducing a whole new, you're trying to introduce a new genetic trait, it's huge. We happened to end up with a batch that did a lot of superseding. So that was the only real actual issue with this method. And we won't know until well after the invasion phase, how well that really goes for it. But yeah, this is the brood that's there, and that's where your mites are going to be. So the other thing we did, if we didn't, because we're alcohol washing once a month, so if there was a whole heap of, if mite levels were up around the 50s and 60s, then I would just pull all the cap brood out and then put the queen in the cage. So there's a lot of different things you can do with brood breaks that really work well. And after you release the queen, if you think, oh God, mite levels are still high, then you can still take out the first 2 frames of cap brood again, even though you're cutting your bee numbers back a fair bit, obviously. All the studies out of Germany say as long as you do that at a good time of year, they will recover quite quickly, and that's what we found. We were running reduced bee numbers because we were doing this like every second month. It was very hard on the bees right through winter and autumn, but we were we're still chemical free. So, that's a big thing for us when we cannot sell wax that's had chemicals in it. Do we have any other questions on this particular method? So the next one is, this is the original one, which is really, so this trap costs us, so we bought these for $85 each from Morrison. We tried some cheap ones. They didn't go to the ends of the hive well enough. They weren't deep enough. They might fit other people's hives, but for us, the Morrison ones fit really well. They're really reliable and really hardy. We've used and abused them pretty well. Whereas this method, you can just cut yourself a bit of plastic queen excluder it's got a little timber rim on it, staple a little strap across, fold it around your frame like that, and just remember to punch a little hole in it so that the queen can get on both sides. So super cheap method. The problem with this one is that you do have to be pretty on the ball. You have to be there more often, so 5 hive visits, 9 days apart. But you're going to put your queen in that one, slide her into the middle there, come back on day 9, swap for another dirty old open frame that you want to get rid of, put the one that she's laid out beside it, come back on day 18, repeat. Get rid of the capped one, pull out the one she's laid on, put in a nice open frame, come back on day 27, let everything out. So there's the same as the other method, there's no brood left in the rest of the hive, and you've just sucked all the mites. Like this can be up to like 98% effective. He's done it's very precise, but he's done a pretty good job of finding something that will get a lot of mites out of the hive very well. Like it's just as effective as synthetic miticides, this one, which was pretty impressive. But yeah, if you get rain for a whole week, you put your whole method back and then the hive is broodless for a long time, whereas the other one, you've got a bit more leeway, even though it's not as accurate. And Summer Brood Interruption for Vital Honeybee Colonies, really good book. It's got a few different methods in it, like they were quite often using these frames that they pulled out. They were going and making other hives out of them, and they might treat that hive with synthetic miticides because it'll have a lot of mites. But then that wax would go elsewhere. Do we have any questions on that one? We're all pretty right. There was an interesting one that I found. I didn't get to go to Vietnam, but I'd love to go there and have a look because they're managing Tropicalaps mite and varroa, and a lot of them are doing it chemical free. So they've usually got like 500 hives in the dry season, 50 to 100 in the wet season. So a little bit more like far north of Australia. But if we get Tropicalaps mite, I reckon it would be very interesting to see how we went with something like this, where they're cutting triangles out of the corners of their frames and letting the bees build drones there and cutting them out every 15 days. And the same as I said you could do before, where the first two, so when they're splitting their hives at the start of the season and using queen cells, and I think that's a really big thing that commercial beekeepers can really start doing, is using queen cells wherever possible instead of bred queens, you're setting your bees back a bit, but you're winning by not having to treat so much chemically and end up like a train wreck like the USA, because your queen cell creates a brood break, and that helps with tropicalax or varroa. Your bees recover from a brood break quicker than your mites do. So they're removing the first 2 capped frames all the time when they split hives. And they're also using strong hives to draw out and lay that drone comb and then distributing it to other hives. That was quite interesting that they could get that sort of control. And yeah, all sorts of different types of queen cages. So I think the big thing that we miss as Australians that European honeybees use to manage pests is a brood break, and it's pretty easy to put one in. Even some of the big commercial beekeepers in the USA, even in southern states, are starting to look at things like because they're having so much lack of success now. They've nearly run out of synthetic chemicals that they can use. So they're looking at putting the whole operation of bees into cold storage, and it's pretty brutal if you're doing that in a hot climate, but a lot of them are doing it to create a brood break to get that varroa under control. So yeah, the only warning I got with the little queen cages, the mascarpone cages, was if you've got older queens, then the bees might not like her being in there and they might knock her off, or if you don't move your hives while they're in there. So that's easy for us as stationary beekeepers. Some people like the Scalvini cages a bit better because the queen can lay. I think, Full Moon Beekeeping has got the little cage out that she can lay in as well. It'll be interesting to see how they go. So mites in brood. Has anyone had a go with a varroa controller?
Yes.
Yep. What did you reckon?
It seems to work quite well. I've still got to work out the timing of treatments.
Yep. So Amber Drop Honey on the coast there, I think they're running 600 hives, and they're just using the varroa controller. So they're using 4 of them, and it was very labour intensive throughout the invasion phase, but I was pretty impressed. If I was a queen breeder, a few queen breeders have said they wouldn't go near them because they're worried about damaging brood and sperm and that sort of thing. But for the average beekeeper, they do look like a pretty cool idea. We saw homemade ones in Germany as well, but obviously your temperature control's just got to be absolutely spot on. But yeah, you're breaking the reproductive cycle still, so you're doing something that the bees are that the mites are unlikely to be breeding resistance to. Formic acid. Have you guys had a go? Have most people had a go with formic acid yet?
No.
Yep. It's interestingly, there was people in both Hawaii and Thailand who are relying just on formic acid to manage mites, either varroa or tropicalax. And I thought that was really interesting, considering all the information says don't use it in hot climates. So we haven't used it. It's notoriously variable, notoriously brutal on queens, notoriously brutal on brood. We had someone say they used it past the used by date, and the used by date is not so much on the actual formic acid, but on the biodegradable cover. So it was well past the used by date, and they used it and it killed the whole hive and all the grass around it. So definitely a lot of warnings with it. But yeah, there's people in hot climates that do use it, and what they often do successfully is they'll keep the wrapper all the way around it and just snip the ends so that you don't get a big blow off of formic acid at the start. So entirely against the chemical instructions, but yeah, for people that wish to experiment. This is a Nassenhof spreader. So formic acid is usually used in Europe in a little evaporator, not as effective, but much kinder on queens. If you're ever determined to use formic acid, there's certainly different ways of doing it than just slapping a strip in like you get told to. Right, so phoretic mites. Do we have any other questions on the brood breaks or anything like that? That's been sort of what we've mostly used. So this is a really interesting table. So removing phoretic mites is obviously your last ditch effort for varroa control. This is a table from Bob Binney his main concern for Australians managing mites was that we have a lot of agricultural chemicals in our environment and a lot of fungicides like this, and even your oxalic acid, they interact. The chemicals that you put in your hive, don't pretend that that's the only chemical your bees are going to interact with, and some of those interactions are pretty nasty. So if you download my Nuffield report later, that's got this whole table in it for anyone that wants to have a closer look. But yeah, any of the chemicals that you use are going to interact with chemicals in the environment unless you're way out in a national park somewhere. And even then, you know, your bees fly a long way. I mentioned before about the, I haven't found anything useful about the bee gym, to be honest, but I mentioned before about sugar dusting. Some people have found it effective or more useful than some of their synthetic miticides. Has anyone here had to go at a Pettis test for chemical resistance with a synthetic miticide?
I haven't heard of that. So can you explain that, please?
Yep, I will do. So a Pettis test, I've got some instructions and a bit of a diagram in my Nuffield report, but there's a lot of information online about it, and you really do want to go through it properly because there's a lot of different ways to do it. But it's basically, if you're going to use varroa or whatever you're going to use, and you're running, even if you're running 50 or 70 hives, there's been plenty of instances where people find out that they get varroa resistance or resistance to any synthetic chemical because they tried it and it didn't work, so all their bees died. You can avoid that situation by doing a Pettis test first. And like I said, go through all the information online, make sure you're using the right method for what you want. But basically, you're doing a miniature test with a small amount of chemical and a small number of bees. Use your little easy check or any grower alcohol wash or sugar shake jar can be used for it. And you're going to put a number of bees and your chemical in there, and you're going to see how many mites that chemical kills, and then you're going to do an alcohol wash and see how many it didn't kill. And the really important point here is don't assume that your synthetic chemical is going to work. The places where people have found out that it didn't work are pretty wild. Are most people here using synthetic chemicals to manage their mites at the moment?
No.
You reckon, so most of you guys aren't. So yeah, that would be really hopeful that hopefully we're going to avoid a bit of in this area. Most of our commercial beekeepers are just reaching straight for the varroa and straight for the amitraz, and it's going to be a big race to see how quick we end up with resistance to them. So it'll be interesting to see how they go. Has anyone here had a go at Randy Oliver's varroa model?
No.
This one's really cool. So I don't have time to actually like run through how to use it, but yeah, if you ever want me to come back and have a play with it or something like that, we can do. But I've got the link for it there, and I've got a few different examples of it in my Nuffield report. But it's a really helpful tool where you can put in X for Southern Hemisphere. You can put in 4, and it's got a little legend there. So 4 means treatment-free, high mite invasion area. And I put in colony type A, that was like a subtropical area. You know, you just follow the letters, follow the numbers, stick the things in that matter for you. And then in this case, I've put in 3 brood breaks, and I reckon I'm collecting 85% of the mites with my trap. I haven't just done a brood break, I've done a trap, and that brings it down. And it's a really good, he spent like a year developing this, and it's really good. So if I took them off, I won't worry about actually going on there now because I'll end up running way over time. But if you do nothing, he reckons your hive will just crash there in the subtropical environment. Whereas if you, say, pulled out 4 frames of brood, maybe you'd get most of the way. But yeah, you could have a play with it. And it was really interesting to play with synthetic chemical layout, organic chemical layout, brood breaks. Very good fun. You don't need to be an expert in Excel, but it's, yeah, you do sort of need to read through it carefully, but it's good to have a play with. So this was our trial results. So here we have, over here, 1st of February to 1st of August. I do apologise because our trainee has finished his uni degree and gone on to bigger things. I haven't had time to collate all the results since August, but they're heading the same kind of direction. So here we have the first apiary got mites here, the second apiary, third, fourth. We have 6 apiaries. The 6th one didn't, it's right in the middle and it didn't get mites until July. And you can see this one here, apiary 1, the mite numbers were just wild, whereas some of these other ones, it never really got that bad. The biggest thing we saw was variation. So this is how many hives were in the trial. There's other hives coming and going, but this is how many were sort of set in that location and with that treatment method. So at this first apiary, since then, the last of the 12, so the whole 12 absconded, or there's a couple that got slimed out. So we lost the whole lot. Most of those absconded before they even hit treatment threshold. And I'm dead sure that was because of varroa mite, because in these other apiaries, we've lost hardly any and that trend has continued. So I'd say this apiary had a lot of surrounding hives. The property owner noted that there was a lot of wild hives there. 11 out of the 12, the queen superseded. 4 of them did it twice. 2 of them did it 3 times. And 9 of those got to the treatment threshold and we actually got to use the isolator cage. And then 3 of them, we did it twice. But we lost too many absconded whereas at some of these other places, even though it's not that much later, we've only had like 1 abscond or none abscond, a couple of supersedures, quite a number of supersedures here. So these are successful supersedures too, where we've let them make their own queen and they've often done it. And then 9 out, so every one of those hives, we used the isolator cage. 2 of them, we had 2 runs at it, so that might have been a couple of months apart. But yeah, you see a bit of a trend, and the biggest trend that I really noted was variation between apiaries. So most of the hives in the apiary did about the same, but big differences between them. Do we have any particular questions about the trial results?
Were they in diverse areas or very similar areas of like bushland or paddocks or?
So we've got a couple on macadamia orchards. We've got 1 on a market garden, and then the other 3 would be on fruit orchards and they would all have a fair bit of bushland around them. They're all within about 40 minutes drive of each other. So definitely in the same region.
And apiary 1 would being such a high, was that in a particular area?
It is the furthest out. It's the furthest away from the others. But the funny thing is too, it's also the furthest away from any other backyard beekeepers. Everyone tells you your neighbouring backyard beekeeper is your enemy, but all these other apiaries are very likely surrounded, whereas this one has the most bush around it. And that's the one that the property owner noted. There's a lot of feral hives in the area. It's on a big macadamia orchard and a lot of bushland. But yeah, it was definitely the one that I did not expect. It was hardest hit by Cyclone Alfred, was a thing I should note too. So what I'm finding is that environmental differences are having more of an effect than anything else on bees and mites.
And is that the moisture content or?
Yeah, just the sheer volume of rain that apiary. So we have a lot of hills near here. And even though the hives are all within about 30 to 40 minutes drive, a lot of these apiaries are only 15 minutes drive at most from each other. But it might likely, one will get 30 mil of rain and the other one will get nothing. So there would be a lot of rainfall variation between them. And I think it had a big difference that apiary 1 got varroa mite right when they really got hammered for about 3 weeks straight with rain around Cyclone Alfred. So it would have been good to treat them earlier. And that's, like was mentioned before, the weather often stymies your best plans for your varroa management.
Was the sheer numbers, because they seem to have the most hives of all the areas, would that have been a contributing factor at all?
I suspect that would be a very high contributing factor. So I monitor feral hives near most of these other apiaries, but I don't know where the feral hives are at this one. I think they're further out in the bush. The property owner knows them. But yeah, I reckon at every apiary, I've seen varroa mite get really high numbers in one hive on the end of the run, and then it gradually spreads throughout the rest of the apiary. I don't know if you guys have found the same, but I think that's the direction that they're robbing out feral hives from. And this one, with high numbers right from the start and just kept going up, sort of thing. So yeah, I think even though your neighbours not your worst enemy beekeeping, but robbing out. I think robbing out feral hives is definitely a big issue for these bees.
Yeah, I just see that all three of the ones with the bigger numbers have all got the bigger infestations all around the same time.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. I think, and I found, so one of the beekeepers that we buy our bulk honey off is much further west. So he's out past this apiary, most of his hives. And he's just put a few, he doesn't know what the big fuss is about. He's had varroa mite for probably only 6 months now. So, we only started having big issues 6 months in. So he's probably at the point where he might start hitting problems now. But yeah, the more isolated they are, the better off you seem to be, except when you're surrounded by feral hives.
And would that be a timberland area?
Yeah, yep, timber area, definitely.
Okay.
So yeah, prime feral hive country. Whereas all these other apiaries, they would have plenty of good feral hive country near them. Like I'm monitoring feral hives who have not died yet near them. But I think the biggest thing around these ones will be neighbouring beekeepers, whereas this one I don't know of any neighbouring beekeepers. I just know of lots of timber country near it.
Yeah. Awesome.
But yeah, the biggest thing I've noticed is variation. And just from talking to other local beekeepers too, where, people who speak to other people go, oh, yep, this is what's going to happen. This is what I can do successfully. Never seems to work that way, or works at this apiary and not that one. So yeah, a lot of variation.
So we put bees back at apiary 1.
Yeah, so I've got another so somebody gave me half a dozen hives. They treated them with varroa, and they had kept bees in New Zealand, and they thought, I treat with varroa, I come back, I pull my strips out, I just leave them for months now, they're fine. And they quickly found out that is not how our invasion phase rolls. And 6 weeks later, their hives were either dying, dead, or looking terrible. And they said, look, the apiary is too far away, I can't get to them. So I inherited this half dozen hives that I'm now going to have to quarantine all the wax out of to make any use for, but I felt sorry for them, so I took them in. And I put them all at this, I didn't feel so sorry for them that I didn't put them at the worst apiary, because that's where I had the space. And they've performed spectacularly. They're charging on. I hadn't at the time, I didn't even put cages in them because they were so weak. I actually just ripped all the brood out of them and just left them to it to see how they would go. And they're charging along. So I suspect now all those feral hives are dead and past the point of being robbed out, and the new slot of hives there are suddenly going fine. Yeah, they haven't got competition. They're just raking in the honey, which I can't use because all the wax is from varroa ridden hives. So I'm gonna have to give it away or wash it down the drain or something. I don't know. But yeah, it's just interesting how it's rolled. And that's only been that was 10 months, I think, when I started putting those new hives there. And they've done great. So the length of the invasion phase seems to be wildly variable. There's people around here that still haven't got mites, or they say they haven't got mites, and they seem to be looking. We'll see. And there's other people whose hives have dead. They've had 30 hives and they've all died, even though they've treated. So massive variation. So the only other thing I wanted to bring up too with a few use is, are most people here pretty comfortable or happy reading a scientific paper?
No.
Yes.
Yeah, mostly, yeah. So so most of you guys would know how to get on Google Scholar then and look for things. But if you don't, you can put Google Scholar into Google, get on there, and if someone tells you this wild method, that you think, oh, I don't know if they're talking rubbish to me or not. You guys are obviously in a great group where you can ask each other. But yeah, I have told a few people to get on there and use Google Scholar, so I won't worry about that too much with you guys. But yeah, if you're running trials, most of you guys would be pretty savvy on a scientific method then. But if you're trying stuff, please, for the love of God, have a control group or have some, don't treat the whole apiary the same with something new so that you can find out what works and what doesn't. Of course, as your president, Nadine, would be the perfect person to ask about how to set up your experiment of the thing that you want to try. But yeah, best resources are the beekeepers, heavily vetted. Scientificbeekeeping.com is a wealth of information on organic chemicals. If you're not quite willing to dive in with all the brood break, he doesn't talk a lot about brood break methods. Varroa Resistant UK is good. B&B Varroa Warriors on Facebook is good. And I haven't really got a lot of really good resources for brood break and mechanical methods yet, but Varroa Resistance 2033 has got the documents now in German, and I'm just trying to get a hold of the English translations, or if they haven't got them yet, the German ones, and I'll brush up on my German. So yeah, watch this space for brood break methods. Even in the 3 years that I've been looking at this, the number of Americans even that are using brood break methods to manage Varroa has gone up a lot. And I think it is the way of the future over any sort of chemical method. And even Randy Oliver doesn't talk about it a lot on his website because I think he's a bit snobby about using European methods, but he's using them. So they're definitely the way of the future. And these are my two favourite books. But yeah, my Nuffield report has a big long list of really good resources that I liked at the end of it. And the only other thing that I really wanted to mention, so key takeaways, I know I'm running a bit over time, sorry. But yeah, using that IPM brood comb, finding resistant queens. We got all ours from Rockhampton Bees, really happy with them. They're in the varroa resistant breeding, great job. And the other thing was, if you know of anyone in the Northern Rivers area, we're looking for a beekeeper. So initially someone to help us out 1 to 2 days a week. But yeah, one of our big suppliers is retiring, and we're happy to help a really good quality young up-and-coming young beekeeper into that operation to guarantee us synthetic chemical-free honey and wax. And what we would really like is to have something like, an Apis M style business in Australia. I think we really need it. Someone to really connect with industry and test and promote best practice pest management on a large scale. So that's sort of, if you know of an up-and-coming young beekeeper that wants to head in that direction, tell them to get in touch with us. And this is actually my favourite photo out of all the photos. This is the back of a German hive. He had been treating chemically for decades and had gone to the brood break methods that Thomas Van Pelt here had shown him while he heads towards varroa-resistant bees in the varroa resistance program. And yeah, he started to see pseudoscorpions. I flipped open the back, and this little guy, he started to see them again in his hives. So it's amazing what comes back in hive ecology when you're not putting even acids in there. Right, sorry I run a fair bit over time there, but do we have any questions?
Jackie, can you just repeat that? I think you call it Apis N style or something?
Yep. So Apis M is a company in the US, and the US does have a few different companies who basically connect with a lot of people in the industry, and they'll do benchmarks. So they'll say, okay, good beekeepers should only get this many losses. Good beekeepers should be able to do this, to get this much production and all that sort of thing. And they help their customers to reach and exceed that standard. So they run trials and they run trials, they survey huge numbers of beekeepers right across the country, and they say, okay, the really top people are doing this, so we're going to get all our customers doing that too. Or we run these trials, we've found this year, this virus is bad, this pest is bad, and our customers are on board with the best practice that we can do. And I think Australia really needs a company like that sooner rather than later. There's a lot of lack of trust in the DPI and in government. So I think it's good if you've got a private company that can do that. that really connects beekeepers. I think, that's a very solitary occupation, and a lot of people are very hidden about their information. So I think we really need to connect as an industry, even if all the information is anonymous, and find out what is best practice for Australia.
And how does APIS-M fund their operation?
So not necessarily APIS-M, but there's a number of companies across the USA that basically manage varroa for people. And it's a customer thing. So people will say, okay, I'm going to sign up for your services. I've got this many hives, so it will cost me this much, and you're going to look after my varroa management for me. And the reason why it's not just APIS-M, there's a lot of companies that do it. And it's a very varied model, because some of them will just say, this is what I do. You tell me what my best varroa management plan is going to be. Others of them will say, I want you to come in, do harbo assays, pick my breeder queens, do alcohol washes, tell me when to treat, maybe even go in and treat as well. So there's services from doing the varroa management up to just writing a plan for you. And
so they're kind of consultants, but okay.
Consultants that range from doing the actions to just writing plans. So the pretty wide range of consultants, and the good ones, their beekeepers will consistently get half the annual average hive losses. They'll consistently get better production and better hive health. Right. And I think that's what Australia is really going to need.
Okay, thanks for explaining.
Yeah, I agree. It would be fantastic.
The
But
hard
we
part,
need some experts first.
Yes. And the problem is, anyone that says they're an expert in varroa mite in Australian bees at the moment, don't believe them. We haven't had it long enough to have experts yet. But I think now is the time to be collecting that information. I've tried to get out of the varroa program, alcohol wash results from around Australia and things like that. And we just don't have the records. We just don't have that cohesive force amongst beekeepers.
Is CSIRO involved at all? Like, they've been Australia's primary go-to people or department for all things agricultural for close on a century. Have they got anything to do with varroa at all?
Oh, that's a good question. Do you want to comment on that at all, Nadine? Have you seen anything out of CSIRO?
I know they were going to look for, because there's been genetic markers overseas associated with resistance, and they were going to see if Australian stock has the same genetic markers.
That'll be a good one.
And they were also involved in that. Was it 2017 or something, that importation stock from the Netherlands?
Yep. And
I think DPI didn't release the release the material for their genetic study.
It wasn't DPI, it was CSIRO and the Australian Queen Bee Breeders Association.
Yeah, and those bloodlines, I'm pretty confident, have proven really useful for Rockhampton Bees, where I get my queens from. I think he had some of those genetics that he said was quite good. AgriFutures was the one that's funded my Nuffield scholarship, and they've definitely done heaps of good work in the beekeeping industry as a whole, but even things like my Nuffield scholarship.
Yeah, and then there's other research groups working on various things as well. We're going to try and get more of them to come and give us talks so we can hear what they're doing.
I'll have to join the Sydney Club just so that I can come along and attend.
Well, if you follow us on our new Facebook page, we'll be putting our talks up on there.
Brilliant.
Actually,
I'd love to have you in person at the event. So do join.
It was funny too. I didn't know how many good bee experts Australia had until I got the Nuffield scholarship and started looking at going overseas. I think we've never really had good connection between different departments and that sort of thing until varroa mite came along. You know, in a way, the silver lining of the cloud with varroa mite is like there's been beekeepers that haven't spoken because their grandparents hated each other, 80 years ago, that have actually come together and talked about their management, and experts that, I've seen actually brought together in a way that I never saw before varroa.
Well, that was a fantastic talk, Jackie. It was both informative and entertaining, which is always good. Um, did anyone have any further questions?
No.